everybody, today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up and my February TBR. So January was not that bad of a reading month. I feel like since the summer, I've just been in this awful book slump. I don't know whether there's just been too many great TV shows going on that I want to watch instead of reading. I think a lot of it has to do with writing my own book, but then there's a lot of it that's like, I have time, so why don't I read during that time? It's been weird, but I feel like I'm slowly but surely coming out of it. So let me share with you some of the books that I read in January that I sped through super fast. They were just so freaking amazing. And then let me get on to the books I shall be reading this month in February. So the first book I read in January was Night by Elie Wiesel. This book was so phenomenal. This book is about a concentration camp survivor named Elie, and he tells his story about what happened inside the camp and how he survived. And it's such a phenomenal read. It's a true story written by the guy who actually experienced it. So I totally recommend anybody and everybody read this book because it's just something I feel like needs to be read and needs to be shared, because this is a point in history we just need to remember, because if we don't remember, it's gonna be forgotten, and we don't want something like this to happen ever again. So after I finished that book, I was in a really historical fiction kick, so I decided to pick up my very first Rudissa Petty's book, which is Between the Shades of Grey. Not these shades. I always call it Between the Shades of Grey, but it's really Between Shades of Grey. But it seems like there should be a the somewhere in between these words. Am I the only one who thinks that? Because I think it very strongly. But this book is a fictional story about this family who lives in Lithuania and what they went through being sent to these Soviet work camps in Siberia. And it's such an interesting story because it shows you this alternate side of the war that we didn't really learn about in history class. And I feel like this story needs to be shared because so many people were subjected to this horror. And so that being said, I totally recommend you read this book because it's just such a great eye-opener to some part of history that somehow got overlooked in history class. So if I'm ever a history teacher, which I doubt I would be because I do not like children, I will be teaching this stuff, okay? Right, Fraser? And lastly, I read the Utopia Book Club Book of the Month, Ever the Hunted by Aaron Summerall, which was kindly sponsored by HMH Books. Fraser, I'm trying to film the video and you just keep on distracting me. No, actually, just biting me. He's not like it's distracting me with his cuteness. He's just distracting me with his awfulness, right? So this book I gave a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy this book. It was such a fun, high fantasy novel, and I totally recommend that you guys read it if you're into fantasy books. Now on to the TBR. Let's get to it. Okay, so the first book I am already reading this month is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This book is so good. It has a story of this scholar who is a witch, and that's pretty cool. And she runs into a vampire, and there's lots of mysterious stuff going on in this world of these creatures, like vampires, demons, and witches, that she has been blinded to because she doesn't really care about it. And then all of a sudden she's thrust into it, and crazy stuff goes on in this novel. And let me tell you, this is the first book that I stayed up late into the night reading because it's just that good. So I have to say I'm pretty much liking this book a lot right now. Next, I started reading this last month, but then I started reading Night by Elie Wiesel, and then I forgot to pick this back up. So I'm gonna be reading it this month, and that is A Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. This really just shares the diary entries of Anne Frank, who was a Holocaust victim. I'm really excited to read this book just because everybody says it's definitely a read you must read if you're into World War II, especially because it's such a thought-provoking novel and heartbreaking, but also gives you awareness of the situation that Anne Frank and her family were in. Next, I gotta get out a little bit of a smutty book because Sasha likes those too. So I'm gonna be reading Sarah MacLean's A Scot in the Dark because it is a Scottish romance novel. Ooh, yes. See me! And lastly, I have the February Utopia Book Club Book of the Month, which is kindly sponsored by Keymasters Press, and that is The Alchemist of Liu by Elise Kova, and I'm super excited about this book just because I've heard so many great things about it. This book is a perfect mashup of steampunk, romance, and kick-ass adventure with a badass female character, and I'm so excited because I've heard such great things about this author and her writing and her books, and I'm really excited if you cannot tell. So guys, that is all for my wrap-up in TBR. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to check out any of these books, I'll be linking them down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!